Alright, yeah, magnificent bastards, welcome back to the channel. The only place where the most deranged ideas to ever leak out of the melting pot that is my skull is treated as a totally normal, discussed topic. And you may be wondering, Killer Studio, what unhinged nightmare have you cooked up today? Simple, lads. Today we're throwing the Tyranids from 40K, the galaxy's most roided up steroid ants, against the only thing that gives those monsters nightmares. Because facing them is the Flood, a parasite best described as a cold that genuinely hates you. So sit back, relax, grab a pint of whiskey, because today we're finding out which one of these absolute deranged abominations could eat the other one whole. So let's dive in. Have you ever had a cold? And I don't mean a wee sniffle. I mean the kind of cold that would put you on your arse so hard you'd start considering violence against your own immune system. No matter how much soup you drink, no matter how much your mum insists it'll help you, you're not getting any better. Congratulations, you've basically got the Flood. Now, while that analogy is a joke, it is also not wrong. The Flood is technically a parasite, though calling it a parasite feels unfair, because most parasites don't actively decide your organs would look way better as a gelatinous soup. The Flood's real horror is in its life cycle, because it's designed to escalate fast. It all starts as a spore, a microscopic thing, barely a millimeter thick. We've all had that problem. Drifting through the galaxy, for however long it takes. Century, millennia, it doesn't care. And whilst it's not sentient, at this stage it does have a will. It's hunting, specifically, for sentient life. And once it finds a planet with some clever enough thing to think, the spore drops into the atmosphere and gets to work. It infects a host. Could be a person, an animal, anything with enough brain power. And here's the terrifying part. The host might not even notice for years. Then the Flood hits critical mass. That's when the pod infectors show up. Small animal level intelligence that operates like ants. Not thoughts, just instinct. Find prey, release pheromones, shout, "Food's on, lads!" and then swarm. From there, hosts get turned into combat forms, carrier forms, and a whole other catalogue of other nightmares. At this stage, if you don't wipe it out within a month, you're in trouble. 2 months, lads. If you haven't already nuked everything, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. Because now the Flood starts building a proto-gravemind. Imagine cracking open 1,000 skulls and pouring all those brains into one horrible thinking soup. At first it's scattered, confused, but add enough biomass, enough memories, enough intelligence, and eventually you'd get a gravemind. And once that thing exists, it's game over, lads. The gravemind isn't just smart, it has a combined knowledge of everything it's eaten. That means technology, tactics, language, history. If the planet had ships, the Flood can fly them. If it had factories, the Flood can use them. And once it has enough biomass, it can start producing pure forms. Adaptive, shape-shifting murder monsters that can reconfigure themselves on the fly. An absolute nightmare to fight in Halo, by the way. At this point, the Flood stops thinking locally and starts thinking galactically. Planet to planet, system to system, an ever-expanding hive consciousness that consumes everything it touches. And here's the really uncomfortable part. There's hints in Halo lore that the Flood may have already consumed other galaxies. Not confirmed yet, but there are enough breadcrumbs to make you nervous. And whilst that's still a mystery, the thing it's about to fight in this video, that monster has come from outside the galaxy entirely. Imagine this for me, if you will. You're out on a lovely walk. The sun is out. The world is fine. And then, without warning, the ground beneath you gives way. You fall down, down, down. Eventually, you hit the bottom of a pit so deep and so dark that it feels less like a hole and more like a place where light simply isn't allowed to exist. Luckily for you, you were clever. You were heading out on a camping trip that day. You've got a pack of matches in your pocket. Unfortunately, the fall has ripped them from you. You scramble in the dark, fingers scraping against stone. The panic rises, and somehow, you find them again. But only one match. One. That's it. And in the darkness, where moving could mean falling even deeper, that match isn't comfort. It's hope. It's the only thing between you and the unknown. So you strike it, and for a moment, bliss. The flame burns bright, cutting through the crushing black. You see again. You breathe. You smile. You're safe. For a moment. Because so can the ants. These aren't normal ants. They're hungry. And you've just lit the brightest come meet me beacon to ever be conceived. At first, they're cautious. They're not stupid. They know you're bigger than them, stronger, dangerous. So they send scouts. You don't even notice at first. Just a few itchy spots, nothing serious. You keep walking, holding your little flame like a torch of defiance. Then a day passes. More itchy spots, more movement. Still, you ignore it. Another day. You're covered now, crawling sensations, constant. You finally kneel down to check your legs. And that's when the horror hits. Thousands of ants, no, tens of thousands, pouring across the floor, across the wall. That primal fear kicks in. The one every child knows. The terror of being small and alone in the dark. You scream, you stomp, you kick, you kill them in droves. But that's the point. Because while you were distracted, the real swarm arrives. They rain down on you from above, from cracks in the walls, from everywhere, millions upon millions, a living tidal wave. You thrash, you slam yourself against stone, you crush as many as you can. But it doesn't matter. They've got grip now. They crawl inside you, mouth, nose, eyes, ears. They eat you from the inside out. You scream until screaming becomes impossible. You thrash until there's no strength left. Eventually, you slump against the wall. Your hand loosens, and the match, the thing you thought was your salvation, slips from your fingers. And in your final moment of fading consciousness, you realize the truth. It was never your way out. It was your doom. And the ants, they eat everything. Your eyes, your brain, your skin, your flesh, your nerves. Even the cartilage inside your skeleton. Nothing is wasted. Every piece of you is stripped, harvested, and added to the swarm. And when there's finally nothing left to take, the ants move on. The last thing in that pit is a dim, flickering match, snuffed out by the very thing it tried to save. You see that, lads? That's a Tyranid invasion. The person was the Imperium, the match was the Astronomicon, and the ants, the Tyranids. And this exact scenario has played out across countless worlds, systems, and even entire galaxies, because the Tyranids didn't come from the 40K galaxy, they came to it. And once they're done here, they'll move on. Which brings us to the real question. Can even the Flood survive something like that? So now you've heard what the Tyranids are. You've heard what the Flood is. Now let's stop talking about theory and see what actually happens when these two nightmares collide. I'm going to assume by this point you know enough about both of these factions by now, but if not, I'll leave links in the description to videos by a couple of my favorite channels who could better explain the lore than I can. There's simply just too much lore here to cover, so go and check out those. But you're not here for a lecture, you're here for the scenario. We begin in a random galaxy. We'll call it Veta 5. A bright, thriving galaxy at the height of its prosperity. Civilization blooms. Ecosystems flourish. Life lives and dies in a quaint cycle of contentment. It is, for all intents and purposes, healthy. Which makes it perfect. Now, both factions are given an equal start. The Flood arrives with a single ship, old, damaged, barely holding together. But carrying infection forms, spores, combat forms, everything it needs to thrive. The Tyranids arrive with one Hive ship, seeded with the genetic materials and bioforms required to begin a planetary harvest. So let's see how this plays out. On the far edge of Veta 5, the Flood makes first contact. The ship crash lands on a world not unlike our own, technologically advanced, spacefaring, already planning colonies beyond its homeworld. It reacts quickly. The wreck is identified and bombarded from orbit. Unfortunately, that doesn't matter. The spores have already spread. At first, it's just illness. 1,000 sick. Then tens of thousands. Then millions. People die. And then they change, mutate, and rise again as something else. Within weeks, a proto-gravemind has already formed. The planet fights back. Hard, orbital strikes, firestorms, scorch continents. But fear and hesitation stops them from doing the one thing that might actually save them. Total annihilation. Refugees flee the infected zone, carrying the Flood with them. And then it's over. The world becomes a flood planet, and the infection spreads outwards. At a terrifying speed, system by system, Veta 5 begins to rot from the edges inwards. On the opposite side of the galaxy, the Tyranids arrive. Their ship doesn't crash, it waits. The planet below hasn't reached space flight yet, but it's close. Primitive orbital weapons, early telescopes, curious, ambitious, unprepared. The invasion begins slowly, deliberately, slowly. Lictors descend first, mapping the biosphere and eliminating threats. Genestealer cults bloom quietly within populated centers. Decades pass with nothing wrong, until the Hive ship reveals itself. A breakthrough in planetary scanning technology finally lets the world see what's been orbiting its moon all this time. A massive organic horror of tendrils and chitin. The government hesitates, debates, delays. And then it happens. Spore rains from the sky. Cult uprisings erupt across continents. In a single perfect coordinated assault, lasting less than 2 weeks, the planet falls. What little remains becomes nothing more than biomass. This pattern repeats on world after world. The Tyranids carve their own path towards the galaxy's core. Eventually, the two predators meet. At the center of Veta 5 lies an unimportant world. No sentient life, only massive animals roaming endlessly. A perfect battleground. By now, both factions are at full momentum. The Flood has evolved. It is corrupted AI. It has built fleets. It creates new forms from stolen biomass. The Tyranids have adapted too. Stronger bioforms, smarter tactics, deeper coordination. The battle begins in orbits. The Flood spores and the Tyranid spores choke the atmosphere. Infection forms clash with Gaunts and Hive tyrants. The fight lasts for months, and something strange happens. The two Hive intelligences notice each other. They probe, they learn. Each is hungry, but each has never encountered something quite like itself before. But curiosity does not stop this war. The Tyranids adapt quickly, developing partial resistance to infection, but the Flood spreads faster than expected. Entire Hive ships are scuttled by the Tyranids themselves to prevent corruption. But it's not enough. The Flood consume, learn, and evolve again, now armed with Tyranid biology. Veda 5 has fallen. This battle is over, but it has not ended. The Flood spreads onward, dominating. For now, the Tyranids retreat, not defeated, but educated. They have learned, they have assessed, and they have adapted. Next time, they will not arrive with one ship, and even the Flood knows it. For the first time in its colossal intelligence, it has encountered a predator worthy of fear. And the next clash, well, that one will decide more than a single galaxy. So there you have it, ya absolute bloody legends. The Flood won. And yes, of course the Flood won. But not because they're bigger, or louder, or scarier. They won for one very specific reason. In the Warhammer 40K canon, we've already seen this happen. When the Death Guard infected a Tyranid Hive fleet, the corruption spread so aggressively that the Tyranids were forced to do the unthinkable. They had to destroy their own Hive ship, just to counter it. That single incident is the backbone of this entire video, because if Nurgle's gifts, crude, stagnant, and frankly messy, can overwhelm the Tyranids' adaptability, then the Flood, a hyper-intelligent, ever-evolving parasite, consciousness that actively learns and actively plans, yeah, that's a problem. The Flood doesn't just infect, it studies. It consumes knowledge, biology, tactics. It doesn't stagnate, it escalates. And unlike Chaos, it isn't playing a great game for eternity. It wants to win. That's why in this scenario, I give the Flood the edge. Not a clean sweep, not a guaranteed victory. If I ran this clash 10 times, the Flood would probably win 6, maybe 7 on a good day. The Tyranids absolutely take wins too though, especially once they've learned what they're dealing with. And that's the key thing. This could technically go either way, depending on the scenario. Which is why I want to know what you think. Who takes it? The galactic parasite that has already eaten other galaxies, or the eternal hunger from beyond the void? Let me know in the comments below. And one last thing before I go. Lads, it's 2026. And honestly, this feels like a bloody good way to start the year. I hope you've enjoyed the return, and I hope you're ready for what comes next, because when I say I've got things planned, I mean it. So if you've enjoyed the video, remember to like, subscribe, and ring that bloody bell. It genuinely helps me more than you probably know. Now, remember lads, the hunger always comes back for seconds. Have a killing day, you bloody legends, and I will see you in my next one.
We were playing in the
Afraid. I am not
and you
your
found a
enemy.
little bad.
I am peace.
Oh, please.
You told me
Don't let
you
them
fell
take me.
I
in
am
love with it,
salvation.
and as I planned,
I am a timeless
when you had
past.
to
Oh God, you don't want Earth. You want everything.
you'd never
What
love
is
a
the
new
name of your ship?
The Mona
wondered if
Lisa.
I could hold it and fall in love with it too.
We share a common
You
goal.
told me to
don't
buy
know,
a
do you?
pony, but
Let
all
my
I
body be
wanted
your
was
shield.
Get out of my head!
The flood had spread too far and too wide.
We exist together now.